Yes, good morning. صباح الخير الزميل الحادي حواري، وصباح الخير كمان لكل متابعي برنامج الدون الصباحي في كل أرجاء البلاد وعبر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. We say good morning to you from the Kenyan capital Nairobi, and as we continue to bring you first-hand information from the Tumaini initiative. Yesterday, our guest in our mini studio here was Pagan Amum, the leader of the real SPLM, and today, as you mentioned clearly, my colleague Bitai Al Hadi Hawari. Today is our guest here in the studio is Wani Michael, who is a member of the People's Coalition for Civil Action, or known as PCCA. Wani Michael, it's good to have you with us. It's been a while, almost 3 years. Welcome to our studio here in Nairobi.
Thank you very much, iRadio. First of all, I want to appreciate the invitation by iRadio. I remember the last time I was on iRadio was 2021, and this is a historic moment for me to speak to our people back home, and also on the very important subject of peace. So I'm very, very delighted to be on the studio of iRadio for the first time, and I hope we'll be able to have a very constructive and a very robust conversation on the process that is ongoing in Nairobi.
Right, let's dive into it, Wani Michael, and let's have your assessment on the atmosphere so far. You've been in this process for some time now. How would you describe the process as we speak?
First of all, I think it is important for us to understand how this process started. This process started by President Salva Kiir initiating the process by writing to the Kenyan President, His Excellency William Ruto, to assist in mediating between the government, the Artigono, and the Holland groups and other stakeholders who had grievances and issues with the Artigono. President Ruto accepted the invitation, and that's when the talks started. I would like to say that the talks have been progressing so well. Of course, with some challenges here and there, as in every political process like this, you expect some challenges, but I could say that the talks are progressing well because the talks are led by General Lazarus Simbeo and Ambassador Guyo, supported by very able secretariat, and I think most South Sudanese know who General Lazarus Simbeo is. He understands the context of South Sudan because he mediated the comprehensive peace agreement. He knows these political leaders one by one. So I believe that this process will be able to bring the fundamental change that some of us have been advocating for, but most importantly, we're able to bring peace and stability to the people of South Sudan. And we want to sincerely thank the government of Kenya for hosting us and facilitating the talks.
And what's the view of PPCA on, I understand we have these 4 key areas that are being discussed in the 75-page report, which was actually given back to you, to the parties, and you have like 3 days now to report on Monday. But let's talk about the 4 thematic areas, especially looking at the justice or the governance part, the perspective of PPCA on that, Wani.
First of all, we made it publicly clear as PCCA, we are not here for political positions. We do not want to have an agreement which focuses on power sharing agreement. As PCCA, our position is that the Tumaini initiative must be able to deliver a constitutional agreement, because we believe that one of the primary problems of South Sudan is constitutional matters or constitutional crisis. So we are advocating for a constitutional agreement as opposed to power sharing political agreement like the RRCs, which became more of a political power sharing agreement. What we mean by a constitutional agreement is that an agreement that leads us into writing of a new constitution so that the people of South Sudan can be able to have their powers with them. We want, as PCCA, that the power of the people must be given back to the people of South Sudan, as opposed to political leaders or political parties continue to share power to rule peace agreements. So we are really advocating on that. Secondly, we believe that for you to have a very genuine constitutional making process, the current structures that are established by the RRCs will not deliver for us peace, or will not deliver for us a constitution that the people will desire for. So we are also advocating that there is need to establish an independent institution or mechanism that will be able to spearhead and oversee the constitution-making process. Because we believe that the National Constitutional Review Commission is deeply politicized, because you have 55 representation of parties to the Artigono political parties, and you have 45% of the stakeholders who are supposed to be representative of the people. So you are going to have a commission that will focus on political issues and political grievances of individuals. One of the things that also we are advocating as PCCA is that you don't write a constitution that addresses individual grievances. You need to address the issues that young people are desiring for, what women are desiring for, on the issues you mentioned: security, governance, justice, and economy are basically the resolutions of the national dialogue. So we are saying you don't need new positions, because the people spoke during the national dialogue. So our position is the People's Coalition for Civil Action, PCCA. We associate ourselves with the national dialogue, and that's what we bring on the table for this negotiation.
Right. And one and I are talking about having a constitutional agreement, and you're talking about, don't you think now, aren't you trying to nullify the ongoing process by the revitalized peace agreement back home there, the process of making a permanent constitution?
We are not trying to nullify the process. Remember, the constitution-making process started in 2012 through a presidential decree that was read in 2012. Now, 12 years down the road, we don't have a constitution. They have not done a lot of public consultation. They have not done a lot of work outside, because they have been marginalized or they have been underfunded by the government since 2012. They have not received any funding. Remember, recently there was government funding to key institutions like the Political Parties Council. I think they received about $5 million. The National Election Commission received about $15 million. But the National Constitutional Review Commission received nothing. So we believe that if you want to have a constitution-making process that speaks to the people of South Sudan, and then you need to establish an independent commission or an independent body which is hybrid, that involve both South Sudanese and non-South Sudanese, as opposed to having the huge number, 57 members, that you need to take care of them. I remember, I think the last thing they have done so far is have meetings for themselves or have some training for themselves in the commission, but they cannot do some outreach. And we also believe that consultations was done during the national dialogue on those issues of constitution. The national dialogue, people spoke from the grassroots. Unfortunately, the constitutional making process act does not make reference to the national dialogue, even the agreement itself. So we believe that there is a deliberate attempt to isolate and ignore the national dialogue resolutions. So we strongly advocate that the resolution of the national dialogue should form one of the key bases of writing the new constitution. You don't need to consult people, because you already consulted them during the national dialogue. They spoke on those issues. They spoke on economy, they spoke on security, they spoke on federalism, and other issues that concern the people of South Sudan. So we feel there are a lot of literatures that you can be able to use. Secondly, you have the revitalized agreement that has very good articles, that have very good proposals. Unfortunately, you have the wrong people implementing the agreement itself. You have the transitional constitution of the Republic of South Sudan as amended. You have the SPLM manifesto of 1983 and 2008, and other instruments that you really have, international and regional instruments that we believe that can inform us to have a first draft of the constitution, because we also believe that you cannot write a constitution in the current context of South Sudan, where the civil and political space is shrinking, and people don't have freedom of speech.
So how can it happen? Where do you want it to happen? Like,
for us, we believe.
Conference you talked about.
For us, we believe that the Tumaine initiative must be able to deliver for us the first constitutional text, and we use that to be able to go back home and make consultation. I mentioned very clearly that there are a lot of literatures out there that can inform us on issues of constitution. I said in the national dialogue, people resolve, and there are resolutions to that effect. People agreed on what are the issues that they want to look forward. And by the way, constitution-making process is a national dialogue. Yeah.
And does that mean you share a similar position with the opposition groups, the coalition of the opposition groups right here in the Tumaini? Because this is similar to what Pagana Mum said yesterday.
Absolutely, we share the same sentiment that you don't need to leave Nairobi to make an initiative without the constitution. So we are saying we don't need a power sharing agreement. We need an agreement that speaks about the constitutional reform and how we can write a new constitution so that we can be able to usher into a new political and constitutional dispensation back home. And I think that is also what the opposition believe in, that what they had been talking about, that they're not here for power sharing agreement. They're here to ensure that we fix the issues that are back home.
And what reforms are you talking about here, Wani?
The constitutional reform, you see, one of the things people talked about a lot, it's the powers that are given to the president, that certain powers should not be exercised, and those powers are supposed to be exercised either by the parliament or by the judiciary. The other constitutional reforms that we are also talking about, it's the issue to do with the justice system, for example. You can imagine that our Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, he's a chief government prosecutor. We are advocating that you need to establish a different department of public prosecution, very independent, who can be able to see whether the evidence provided before him or her, he can be able to prosecute. We believe that one of the issues about issues of loan, for example, you might have heard, we got about the government want to secure about 13 billion US dollars, I think, from Dubai, one of the companies in Dubai. But if you look at most of the agreements that are signed by government, the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, which act as the Attorney General, mostly is not consulted to provide legal advice and consent. So we are basically saying also you need to establish an independent office of the Attorney General who then assist government on legal matters, and you separate it from the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. So we are also saying you need to have a reform on that. The other reform is within the judiciary, and we believe that judges and the justices of the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court should not be appointed by the president. Rather, they should be recruited through an open and competitive process by the Judicial Service Commission, and then go to Parliament, and then the president does the last appointment. And we're also saying the president does not have any other power to remove any judge or justices of the courts. So those are some of the many reforms that we are proposing. But also, just to emphasize, we are aware that the economic situation back home is very, very serious.
That was my next question, actually, because we want to look at, because this is one of the main pillar in the four thematic areas that you have been discussing here for the last almost 1 month. So let's talk about the economy from your perspective, and what reforms are you putting forward there?
Yeah, basically, you see, the issue of our economy is basically about mismanagement and misappropriation of funds and lack of top priorities of government. And I want to take you back. Remember, between 2012 and 2013, the government announced austerity measures. And in those austerity measures, government indicated that they are going to pause some developmental projects. And they could not continue with the development projects. However, even with the austerity measures that they were in after today, they still continue to live in luxury. They still continue to purchase expensive vehicles, government vehicles, for example. They still continue to live in a very luxurious way, and they expect the people of South Sudan to live in austerities. So the issue is not that we don't have money. We have money, but the problem has been misappropriation. Others call it corruption. Some of us call it looting of public funds. And I'm happy to hear that the parliament is picking this up, where I just heard from the news of iRadio, where the Minister of Cabinet Affairs, Honorable Martin Elialomuro, was grilled by parliament yesterday to explain the $10 million that was given to him to facilitate the peace implementation mechanism. So we are proposing that there is need, for example, to do an all-life audit, or to, one of the things in South Sudan we don't understand is that we don't know our debt burden. Who do we owe and how much do we owe people in our foreign debts? So we are calling for an all-life audit, where we have to audit both the resources that we have as a country, and that audit then will be able to provide us with a very good report in terms of how much money we owe people, and how our resources have been mismanaged, and how we can secure this money back, because these are public funds. These are not individual individual funds. So, and then also we ensure that there are reforms within the financial institutions and accountability. One of the things also done is the accountability aspect of it. Nobody wants to account. I can't remember the last time that the government, the executive account to parliament. You know, the Auditor General has produced so many reports, but nothing happened to those reports. So we believe that you need to have an independent anti-corruption commission, for example, with prosecuting powers, like what happened in some of the countries, where they don't need to go to the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs to seek for prosecuting power. So we want the anti-corruption commission to be empowered to prosecute people who have corrupted money, people who misuse public funds, so that we'll be able to really recover. Lastly is the issue to do with how we manage our oil resources. Unfortunately, we don't have reserve. They have exhausted the reserve. So we believe that there is need for proper management of the system. Lastly is that we are also advocating that every funds of the government must be put under one single account, as opposed to different institutions of government having different accounts. So you have a single account so that it will be easy for you to be able to manage. But most importantly, you need to liberate.
There was a story of government having one single account, but we are yet to follow up whether it's being operationalized or not. Yes.
Yeah.
And Wani, with all what we are talking about here, and especially at the Tumaini initiative here in Nairobi, having different views on the constitution, on the economy, and also talking about governance, but back home there, the government is talking about elections in December this year. I want your take on that.
You know, elections is a process. Election is not an event that happens overnight. You wake up in the morning and you go to vote. The election is a process. And as PCCA, we had met our position clear on elections. We said there are key prerequisites that need to be met before you conduct elections. One of the key prerequisites, which is even in the agreement, by the way, I think should be Article 6.10 of the peace agreement, and some other articles of the agreement or provisions of the agreement, indicates that for you to conduct an election, you must have a new constitution. So you organize election in accordance with the constitution, not in accordance with the law. Yes, you have the National Election Act, but the constitution that we have right now, which I participated in writing it, I'm talking about the Constitutional Amendment Act number 6, which gave the Artigono legitimacy and constitutional order. We have 5 vice presidents in the current constitution. So are you telling me that you're going to go for election with the 5 vice presidents as running mates? Because you ought to amend the constitution so that it can be able to appreciate elections.
Not if they amend the constitution before the elections.
Yeah, even if they are to amend the constitution to appreciate the election, you have to amend almost all the articles, because we have so far amended everything, including even the preamble, by the way. The preamble of the 2011 constitution was amended, and we had to incorporate the one of the agreement and delete the previous preamble that we had. Remember the one that we had with the people of South Sudan? It had to be edited, you know. So you need a constitution as a key prerequisite for elections, because as I said, elections must be conducted in accordance with the constitution and the law. But
there is also a talk that how can you have a permanent constitution with members of parliament who are appointees of the revitalized peace agreement? Why can't you have elected MPs to have to work on a permanent constitution? Is that argument still ongoing back there?
Our argument is that you don't need to take the constitution to parliament. Our agreement is that, which has happened in so many countries, including I think Kenya, Uganda, and some other countries, where the National Constitutional Conference is transformed to be a constituencies assembly. So for us, our argument is that you don't need to take the constitution to parliament. What you need is that you transform the National Constitutional Conference into a constituencies assembly, and thereafter they pass the constitution, you take the constitution for referendum, thereafter it is signed.
How many people are we talking about here in the conference, for instance?
You could talk about 1,500. Yeah, but remember, we are saying it must be put on constitutional referendum. So after the National Constitutional Conference, you take the constitution to the people through a referendum, and after that, then the president signs. So you don't need to take the constitution to parliament. That is our argument, and this has happened in so many countries. I said, including Uganda, where the National Constitutional Conference was transformed into into a constituency
And how
assembly.
practical is this in a country like South Sudan? You're talking about referendum because it's the same scenario. We're talking about elections and conflicts in some parts of the country, looking at the remote areas, access to those areas, roads, and among many others. This is the same argument that people are talking about on elections. What about the referendum? How would you reach out to the people?
You know, one of the things that I think we need to appreciate as a country is that the constitution is written for the people. It's the people writing the constitution, not the politician, not other people writing the constitution. So we believe that if you are to conduct a constitutional referendum, you deal with two issues. One, you deal with issues of ownership. People will be able to own. Remember the reason why the CPA is owned by the people and owned by the people, because there was wider public participation, there was wider consultation of the people, and so you needed a constitutional referendum so that people will have ownership of the document. People will be able to understand, because you know, a referendum doesn't mean that it has to happen like tomorrow. There are so many processes that people need to understand. Some of the articles and some of the issues that the proponents of the constitutional referendum wanted the people to really vote on this issue. The second issue deal with legitimacy, so that people will be able to legitimize the process and say this is our constitution. So for us, we believe that the end product of this process is that you have a constitutional referendum where people approve the constitution, then the president sign it. So you don't need to take this constitution to parliament.
Right. Let's go back to our main studio in Juba. We have 22 minutes to the top of the hour. الحادي حواري نسلم لك الميكروفون عشان نرفع بعض من المكالمات من المستمعين ونرجع هنا لزميل بتاعنا ونرجع هنا لضيف بتاعنا في الاستوديو واني مايكل. الحادي حواري. alright thank you شكرا جزيلا الزميل الحادي حواري. والسؤال الاخير بجد ما قدرنا نلقاه كويس من حسن لكن اعتقد انه السؤال كان بيمشي للحكومه. نجي هنا لضيف بتاعنا في الاستوديو واني مايكل. We have about 11 minutes to wind up. You can respond to the questions comprehensively. Suleiman was asking in Arabic that we must have a permanent constitution because it's the right, but people have the right to participate. So he's talking about the way forward. Majung Sudan asked in English, you already have that. And Sibu Kida was talking about all parties in Nairobi were SPLM according to him, and they split for positions. So he's asking, what is new are you people really bringing this time around? Majung Sudan also asked, Franco Sebit, and then David Magog. It's your turn.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the callers who called in. I managed to understand some of the Arabic. You know, I have a very terrible Arabic. I need to learn better. I think there are a lot of questions resonate around the constitution making process. One of the things that I want to point out is that the constitution making process is not a new process. This process has started way back. Others said 1972 when we had the Addis Ababa Agreement. Others talk about the CPA and other processes that we have. So we, as PCCA, our position is that it must be people's led and people's own constitution, but not the way the Artigono is doing it. Because the way the Artigono is doing it is people's led and people's own constitution making process, but they're giving themselves 55% representation in the National Constitution Review Commission and in the National Constitutional Conference. So our position is very clear on the talks. We are saying, one, we want the NCRC dissolved and disbanded because it will not deliver constitution to the people of South Sudan. The National Constitution Review Commission was formed since 2012. Up to now, they have not done anything with the constitution making process. So we are saying you need to dissolve the National Constitution Review Commission and then establish a lean hybrid independent body, constitution making body. Hybrid, we mean involvement of both South Sudanese and non-South Sudanese. By the way, the Namibia constitution was written by 3 experts who were South Africans. The Kenyan constitution was written by 9 panel of experts, and from the 9 panel of experts, they had 3 people who are non-Kenyans or foreigners who assisted in the writing of the Kenyan constitution. So the Kenya is so far one of the celebrated democracies in the region, and you could see how their constitution can be able to has able to bring them together. The constitution has able to advocate an advanced democracy.
So you're saying we can
absolutely. You don't.
We can have.
You don't need. You need like 9 or 11 people. You don't need 57 people to do what? Because you have to spend a lot of money on them. And these 57 members, 55% are political leaders, and everybody has to advance their political agenda as opposed to advancing the interests of the people of South Sudan. I want to address one of the issues of location. I think this is one of the things that people have raised. We are not saying that people should not participate, for example. We are saying, for example, you'll agree with me, Achilles, that the CPA was negotiated and signed in Naivasha, in Kenya. It was taken to Southern Sudan by then, which then gave us the referendum. In the referendum, people voted for the secession of South Sudan. Was the CPA negotiated and signed in South Sudan? No. But it gave us a country called the Republic of South Sudan. The ASIS, that was signed in 2015, that gave the Tigono a legitimacy. Was it signed and agreed from Juba? No. It was negotiated and signed from Addis Ababa. The
2018.
Yes. The one of 2015.
2015.
Yes. Then in 2018 you had the revitalized agreement, which was again negotiated in Addis Ababa and Khartoum. Then signed in what? Signed in Addis Ababa, carried in the plane to Juba, and gave the current article legitimacy for 6 years. So the idea that you cannot have those conversations outside the country is a non-issue, because we had documents, we had processes, including the one that led us into our independence, discussed outside the country. So for us, and the reason why we say it's difficult for you to start the process in South Sudan, one is because you have shrinking political and civil space. For example, right now in Juba, you cannot have a gathering of 5 people and you don't get a security clearance from the national security.
You mean more than 5? Because five friends can sit.
You see, even sometimes you're having a coffee with your friend, you will be asked, maybe you're having a meeting. So we are saying also there's a problem of freedom of speech and there's no freedom after speech. So we are basically saying that you can have a first draft of the constitution through the main initiative. That's why we are saying we are not here for power sharing agreement. We needed that we leave Nairobi when we have the first draft of the constitution. Earlier when I mentioned that, first of all, consultation was done. I talk about the national dialogue. The national dialogue, people spoke on those issues. You know, the grassroots consultation was done. Those are constitutional issues. All the issues that we are talking about here in Nairobi were also articulated and discussed in the national dialogue. I also talked about the SPLM manifesto of 1983 and 2008. You have the current constitution, you have the RRCs. So for us, we believe that consultation was already done by through the national dialogue. What you do, you have to get those documents and have a first constitutional draft. You take this constitution to the people, you make consultation to the people based on the draft that you have, so that people are aware, people input on the draft that you already have. Then you have a national constitutional conference in Juba, which then transform into a constituency assembly, and then approves it, and then you have the constitutional referendum.
Right. الهادي هواري ده كل ما عندنا الليلة من برنامج الدون الصباحي. في الفقرة الثانية نرجع لك الميكروفون في العاصمة جوبا. شكرا جزيلا.